The market analysis is a tool you use in real estate to establish a price point. It's important you understand what goes into that. To hear this episode, stay tuned.
The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. Today, we're going to be talking about market analysis. A market analysis is a tool we use as realtors to help establish a price point for a property. But before I get into that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul, hand me the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Groen, and the boss, Shannon, Martin Martinez. My name is Ben. Round two, Lyons.
This can be a good one.
Round two, that's right. So for our viewers who don't know, sometimes we mess up these episodes and forget to hit record or forget the cameras or whatever else. I mean, but we give grace, right, Paul Berry? We give grace in this.
I have no expectations for this one.
We don't give any to Paul.
We did a great one last time, but
it was great.
We'll see how this one goes.
Yeah, until we figured out we didn't hit record, and that's okay. That's part of it. But today is going to be a fascinating topic, the market analysis and what goes into it. And it really is a key component, a key tool we use as realtors, because you do have to put a lot of thought into a market analysis to help establish a price point. And there are things we have to consider when approaching a market analysis as a professional, because we could maybe be liable if we don't do it right. But Shannon, see, you were looking at me. I could feel it. I know.
Dang it.
You know, my daughter said this morning, she said, "Dad, I saw you filming me as I was walking to the school yesterday." And I said, "You saw that?" She goes, "I got the eyes in the back of my head." So guess it runs in the family, Shannon Martin. Let's kick
Apparently
it off here. And talk to us a little bit about a market analysis and how you approach it. Just give us kind of an overview of your thoughts on a market analysis.
So for me, I take a couple of different approaches. I always try to look at recently similar homes in the area, what's been sold. I also, though, want to look at what's available, because you can set a price, but then you want to look at your current competition on the market. So those are kind of the two things that I look at. I try to base my most of my adjustments on, area, size, condition of the home. If I'm making some adjustments, you might have something that's a little bigger, a little smaller. You make some adjustments for that. You might have something that maybe has a lot more upgrades than your subject house, or your subject house may have more upgrades than your comps. So those are kind of the key components. I try to find the most similar properties that I can, hopefully in the area. You can go out of the area if you don't have it. And then try to gather that information and start breaking it down from there. So that's kind of the first step, is finding the best comparable properties that you can, and then just start breaking them down where it makes the most sense.
Now, do you put more weight on a similar home, or in the sense of the size and the quality of it, or do you put more weight on the actual location?
That's a tough question. I guess it just depends. I mean, sometimes that can be different. If I have a neighborhood where there's 12 sales in the last year, obviously I'm going to use those first before I use something outside of that. But if it's super unique and it's really not even conforming to the area, then I might put more weight on a home that's outside of the area, that's more like the home that we're talking about, as long as the areas are similar. If the areas are similar, maybe they're both in the north side of Farmington in very desirable, neighborhoods, then I might put more weight on that.
Yeah, so it's
really individualized.
Yeah.
When you do a market analysis, I mean, each home is going to be different. What information you're going to extrapolate out of the market to use, I think, is going to be different each time you do it. A lot of times it's the same. It's just, you're in a busy neighborhood, you just pull the comps, it all makes sense. But sometimes it can get you can get down in the weeds with having to make a lot of changes and adjustments.
Yeah, we don't live in Phoenix, right? Where you have 700 of the same homes in that area within a mile that could all conform to a market analysis. So we do have to try to extrapolate more here in this area because we have a lot more unique properties Paul, when you talk about doing a market analysis or when you perform your market analysis, how far back in time do you go and give some rationale to your approach?
Well, when the market was a lot slower, I would go back a year. Now I've shortened that up quite a bit. The farthest I'll go back is 6 months because the market is changing so quickly now. I do the same as you. I look at what's sold and what is active, but I'm very cognizant of, like, I call it micro markets. We have a little pocket, a little subdivision. Could be right next to something that's been built in the 80s, and these were built in the early 2000s. And obviously those don't need to do a lot of adjustments if you use those for comps. But yeah, I think you have to stay within 6 months at the most right now.
Yeah, because the market's fluid. It's constantly moving. And like you said before, when maybe the market was a lot slower, we had to go back 12 months because there just was a lot less change in the ebb and flow of the market. So it was appropriate, right? It was appropriate to go back 12 months. So let me ask this. Aspen, you can take this one. If you were approaching a market analysis, how much leeway do you have in your numbers? I mean, do you say, hey, this is definitively where I think I'm planting my flag there, or hey, I'm open to discussion. This is really a pretty unique property. How do you approach that with your sellers, that conversation?
I normally will come with some kind of a range for the property. And then whenever I, get down on, maybe they had just replaced some really big items, like maybe they redid high-tech plumbing or they have a new roof or something, a big expense that would adjust, make an adjustment on the property, then I might adjust it. Or sometimes I'll even come in and say, this is the range, but I think we should price higher. It doesn't happen very often, but I do think sometimes you can go above. But I do like to set the expectation that this is where the appraisal might come in. I think it's really individualized for each property. And the longer that you're in the business, you can kind of gauge where you think it's going to go. And it really depends on the neighborhood. Is this a very, very popular neighborhood where a lot of people are looking, then houses never come up for sale? I think you might have a little bit more leeway to go a little bit higher versus if it's, there's 5 houses already for sale. This is all the range that they're in. It probably doesn't make sense to price your house the highest in the neighborhood. So
you do take in account active listings in your market analysis?
Yes, I don't use it for my numbers, but I think you have to take into account active listings. If there's a house that's almost exactly the same, that's been for sale for a month and it's priced maybe a little bit high, you probably want to come in a little bit underneath that.
Yeah, because the best price, the best value is going to win out time and time again. And Paul, I'm assuming you do the same because Shannon said the same, is that she takes the active, she builds those in. But does it actually affect your numbers or?
No, I don't really put that in my market analysis. I do the market analysis based on sales. Then I will pull all the active ones and we have a separate maybe discussion about that. So the actual numbers I do from the sales, because that's what we're going to see from an appraiser. That's what is really going to establish price. But then I want to also talk about that. Again, if you've got nothing for sale in that neighborhood and, 10 of them have sold in the last year and they were all on the market less than 5 days, you can probably be a little bit more ambitious with your price. Like Aspen said, you've got some similar homes there and they've all been on the market, 30 days or more. You probably don't want to be really ambitious with that price. So that's going to help us really set where we're going to go to market at. But I am going to try to establish a price based on sales.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say, as the market, like we talked about, the market is pretty fluid right now. As the prices were going up, we would see sales that were lower. All the comparable active listings are all higher. So sometimes I'll say, okay, here's where it was. Here's where our competition is. It's got to be somewhere in the middle, and now we're going the other way. Prices are starting to come down a little bit. So sales were high. All of our active listings are, a little bit lower. That's the conversation I use with sellers to say, hey, look, the market is moving away from you right now. So you've got to just accept the fact that you're going to get less than you would have a year ago.
Yeah, that's a hard conversation to have because some people are still holding up. We talk about that all the time. They're holding on to last year's prices. So they say, well, last year there was 3 or 4 in my neighborhood that sold. They all sold at this price point. They're all similar to my house. That is true. But we are in a different market now. And now if you price there, you're probably going to sit on the market for a while, do a couple of price reductions before you get where you're going to be. And sometimes people don't like to hear that.
Yeah. And I think with the market analysis, you got to give the data to the seller. So here's what the market is telling us. And then pricing strategy is figuring out where that price is based on what it's telling us. So I think what you're talking about is more pricing strategy. But I think it's good to just say, here's all of the data. Here's what I can see. This is where your house would appraise right now.
And that's a fair, and I'm glad you said that, because you're talking about two different things. You have a market analysis, which is you try to be as very objective as possible. Here's the black and white of what's happened in the market. But then there's a pricing strategy, which is a different component that you have to talk about. So those are two very different things. Here's the market analysis, and here's the pricing strategy, or my thoughts on the pricing strategy. I'm glad you delineated between those two. Aspen, what are your thoughts on that as well? Should you incorporate that all together, or should those be separate?
I think they're separate conversations, but I think it all comes together. Maybe, you can say to a seller, look at all these 5 houses in the neighborhood. They've been on the market for 30, 40 days. They're still active. They're not under contract. Do you want to sell quickly? We should probably price a little bit lower. Sometimes they might just be happy to sit and wait too. So it just depends on what each individual seller wants, and what they're wanting to do will base how we're going to price the house. If they want to move quickly, then we need to have a realistic conversation that we probably can't list at the very, very top end. We might need to list a little bit more competitively, maybe try and get a bidding war going and go from there.
Yeah, and I think, my mind goes to like the old beta and gamma waves. You got these two waves that are kind of like working. Stop. Oh, come on. Hey, I took physics, or is that physics or something? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Let's not go there. But if you could picture in your mind like two waves that are kind of going against each other, that's what happens. That's the reality of the market, right? Because sometimes you have this big push in the market and you don't have a lot of inventory. So then that's an opportunity to say, hey, we can be a little more aggressive with this pricing upward versus downward. And then the vice versa, that is that you have a lot of inventory that just hit the market. You have a house that may not have the upgrades. So then you don't want to chase the market down. You want to start a little bit lower. So you've got these little micro markets that are happening within the analysis.
I think you need to know who your buyers are too. Mm-hmm. If you are listing a very high-end house, a lot more people could qualify for that whenever the interest rates were 2 and 3. Now you have a very small pool of people. Even in the high mid range, you still have a much smaller pool of people than you did a year ago. So if you're coming in on the lower price side, you might be able to get more offers. You might be able to sell a little bit quicker. If you have an investment property, you're probably going to have more people going for it that are maybe cash buyers. So you need to know who's going to buy your house as well, and how big of a pool you're going to have.
Yeah, and that plays into some of the timing, right? With just the economics, interest rates. Like right now, we're facing an election just a couple weeks out. In fact, when our viewers see this episode, we'll probably know who the next president is. But right now, does that affect people's willingness to buy just a couple weeks before an election? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you both just made, because I think that sometimes the general public doesn't know how much we put into a market analysis. All those thoughts of what's going on in our local economy, what's going on nationally, what's driving buyer confidence, how many buyers can buy right now, where those interest rates sit. It's not always about what your neighbor's house sold for. It's what that sold for, and then what all is going on around there as well. There's so many components that I think a good realtor looks at. Some realtors just look at the data and they don't do any adjustments and they don't account for anything. It's just black and white, but that's not reality.
That brings up an interesting point. I've had a lot of conversations with people about the new LDS temple that's been brought into town, and people are saying, well, that's going to drive home prices up. That's going to bring in a lot of new construction. And I haven't seen that affect an appraisal yet. I haven't seen it, factor into pricing at all yet. So the public has a lot of opinions on what's going to happen, like the Amazon warehouse that was built that people are starting to get trained up for. Some of the restaurants are coming in. People think that has an effect on housing prices and local economy. It has an effect on local economy, but have seen very little on a boom to housing.
Right. I've seen an increase on the housing from the LDS temple in that area. Like
directly related to that?
I think so. Yeah, that neighborhood was not quite as popular. I'm seeing a big push for people there, especially rentals, and think people want to be in that area now. I think it kind of used to be more average area, but I'm seeing a big push back there.
Well, and there was a lot of talk for, right when it was approved, before they even broke ground. I mean, because you got to keep in mind, this takes 2 years to build. And so there was a fury, a lot of excitement, I should say. What is that?
Flurry.
Frenzy.
A frenzy. Thank you. I knew I was close.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, stop. There was a frenzy of excitement, hey, the temple's coming in. This is going to be great, which is wonderful for our community. But then it didn't parlay what you were saying, Paul. It didn't parlay right away. Now it may be kicking in. So now these are things that we're factoring into the market analysis. If you have a home in that, general vicinity, then that could parlay into something, which may eventually drive appraisal prices up.
I don't think we're going to see it as a line item, we're adjusting because we're in the temple, but I think you see more people interested in that area and more eyes on that area. I mean, those houses used to go for $180, and now we're seeing houses in the mid threes in just a few years. And that could be, because of just the price increases that we've seen. But that area specifically, I think it is in correlation. You're not going to see it as we adjusted up because of this, right. But just more people looking in that area, more eyes on it, more talk, I think does drive up the price in a slow turn. And I think whenever it actually opens, we're going to see even more of that.
Yep, I would agree with that. And then you have two different neighborhoods that I'm thinking of two in particular, newer construction. One is on one side of town, the other is on the other side of town. And you can't use those same comps because they're two similar products, I would say, similar quality, I would say, but two very different price points, which is kind of surprising. I think the biggest thing is that one of the developments has access to zero down financing and some other things like that. And they've been able to play off of that and probably push prices up a little bit higher than what I would be comfortable with. But so you can't use that, even though it's the same square footage, the same type of home, same almost quality of home, but it's across town. That's not a great comp because it's under two separate sets of conditions. And so those are the things as a practicing professional, you should be considering when putting a market analysis together. And let me ask this, and anyone can jump in on this question. Is there liability on the realtor side if that market analysis is not done correctly and a seller maybe sells their property for undervalue?
I think so. I mean, I think you could find a disgruntled buyer if they find out later maybe their appraisal came in, $50,000 over what you had sold it for them, and they realize that maybe you didn't do the best job for them. I mean, I've never had that happen, but I'm sure that would definitely be on someone's mind of wanting to hold someone accountable for something like that.
Yeah, a disgruntled seller.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would see it more like if you listed it really high and you said, I can get this price for you. And then it comes in where maybe some other realtors said, and maybe you set it high just to get the listing. Right. That's where I would get more disgruntled.
And you can even see where...
I would feel like I was lied to.
And it's not even about the lie. You could see where someone could even be damaged. With the way our market has changed lately, if you had one realtor saying, I can get you this, and maybe they put it on there and then they've missed a window of opportunity and now it's even lower by the time they get there. And then they feel like you've wasted their time. I could definitely see where the public would be not happy with our market analysis not being there. And sometimes it isn't always going to be spot on because the public ultimately makes that decision. We've all had those listings we put out there and we're just shocked that we had multiple offers and it ran up farther than we thought it would even go, or vice versa. We put something on the market we're just sure is going to have a ton of showings and the public doesn't take it the way they want. Sometimes that happens too. It's not really our lack of doing the best job. It's, the buyers ultimately decide what they want.
Yeah. And I don't think we're in a market right now where you can drastically underprice a house.
I don't think so. We have too many buyers right now. I've tried to kind of have some of those conversations when someone's a little bit worried about it. Look, if it's under, we'll get multiple offers and they'll bring it up there. Now that's not always the case. They're, in different times of the market. But for right now, I think we're pretty safe right now. The buyers are going to run that up. We've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, if you price aggressively downward, then the market tends to push it up to where it is. There's that equilibrium there. If you miss it, I would agree with you, Aspen. If you miss it on the high side, You miss that window of opportunity. People are making decisions about what they're doing in their future based on what you're telling them as far as the numbers. That's not coming to fruition. So you're over-promising and underperforming as a realtor. That's a slippery slope. I will say on the other side, if you do sell an off-market home, you better have your ducks in a row. You better have your market analysis dialed in, because there's an argument that the open market wasn't able to see that property, and the open market is what ultimately determines the price. So if you are selling an off-market home, which we do quite a bit for various reasons and strategies, and also sellers' wishes, we have to be careful that we're backing those numbers up and saying we're really confident that this is where those numbers should fall. But ultimately, it's the seller's decision. So I could see some culpability there for realtors. So realtors really need to think through their market analysis before just willy-nilly that's a country singer, Paul. Willy-nilly. Okay. Throwing a number out there. You got to be real careful with that. What would be one of the most important things you would say to a new realtor if they're trying to learn how to do a market analysis? What would be some of the things that you all would be saying to that new realtor? Paul, I'll start with you.
Set what you think are your important parameters, whether it's amenities. So I always go with age, location, size. So your GLA, your gross living area, that has to be close. I want to start out within a quarter mile, and then I'm not going to compare a 1970 home with a 2020 home. So you kind of have to, the term apples to apples, we get away from that once we get a little bit more experience. But when you start out, try to stay apples to apples in your comparisons. Don't go too far outside of those parameters. Go within the last 6 months, because it's a busy market, and then get a second opinion. Yeah. Have somebody check your work.
Yeah. Is it beneficial to have an appraisal right up front?
I've had that bite me a few times.
Yeah.
Appraisal comes in at a certain point, especially in this market where the market's kind of going quickly towards a buyer's market, in my opinion. I've had appraisals come in a little bit high. They wait a little bit longer, or appraisal comes in. They wait to sell for about a month. And by the time you hit the market, that appraisal is no good, because remember, an appraisal is a snapshot in time. A market analysis is a snapshot in time. This is what we can see right now. 6 months, those are out the window.
And ultimately, it's what the market wants to pay for the property that determines the value. So, this is not a knock on appraisers by any means. We've got some great appraisers we work with, but, as realtors, we're in the trenches. We're out there. We're in the market with the buyers, with the sellers. And then boom, we've got a contract. And the appraiser comes in after the fact and justifies, rightfully so, what has been done and says, okay, this within reason, within bounds of what I can justify on paper. So you're not overspending buyer, right?
Yeah. So, and to get back to your original question was, say that appraiser comes in and appraises a house at $400,000. We do some repairs. We get it on within 2-3 weeks, get the house on the market. It sits for a little bit because the market has changed, or there's something about the house buyers don't like. Then all of a sudden we get a contract, another month goes by before the appraisal happens. All of a sudden the appraisal comes in different. Mm-hmm. So that price is not necessarily valid 3 months from now, for 3 months from that date. So I think, you always have to, and that's the other thing to tell new realtors. If you have a house that's been on for a while, update your market analysis. Because if you go to the seller and say, hey, the market's telling me now we started at 400, it's saying 375 now.
Yeah.
So we're out of the market.
Okay. That's fantastic. I love that. I'm going to switch gears to a different question for you, Aspen. How do you treat a basement? Because a lot of people say, I've got 4,000 square feet. It's like, well, you have 2,000 square feet of a basement, and then 2,000 square feet of an upper level. How do you treat that in your market analysis?
I'm going to do 25 to 50% lower, just depending on, is it fully finished? Is it walkout? Is it heated and cooled? Does it have maybe some special amenities? Is it a theater or whatever? If there could be so many different options. Some things would be more appealing. A fully finished, hangout area with a walkout basement is going to be a lot more appealing than just a big empty space. So I'll adjust based on what is actually down there, but it's going to affect my market analysis. Same for if the primary bedroom is upstairs, or upstairs or downstairs, not on the main level. That's going to affect my market analysis as well, because that is going to cut out some of the buyer pool. So there's a lot of different things. I think whenever you're first getting started, I personally got with an appraiser and had them teach me how they do it. So I wasn't coming in just guessing. And then I took what they taught me and I was doing a market analysis on every house that I knew. And then I was having my qualifying broker look over it. So if I was doing it on my parents' house and my sister's house, and just practice. The more you practice, the better it is. If you're going to take, a farm and ranch or a commercial, you're going to use completely different things to do that. So I would just practice on everything you can. Just pick a house and
run with it.
Run a market analysis on it.
Yep, that's a great answer. Shannon, your thoughts on what you would tell a new realtor if they were starting out with market analysis? And also, I have a follow-up question about buyers. Do you do a market analysis for buyers? It's a two-pronged question.
I do. I don't do the same market analysis for a buyer that I do for a seller. I'm not going to pull a bunch of comps, do a bunch of work and put it in writing. But what I will do before we write an offer is just kind of look at an overall around the area to say, yeah, that seems in line. What we're offering seems in line. Or I can at least come to them and say, look, you're really offering a little bit lower. Just know that going in, because maybe they're competing and they should know that. Or know that, you're offering a little bit more and it's been on the market for a while. You might be able to offer less. Whatever it is, just give them all the information they can. I don't do a full blown. What I do want to talk about when we're talking about what kind of advice to give for new brokers is know the difference between a market analysis and an appraisal. And we kind of touched on that. But, the market analysis is basically for what we're going to say, this is what we think buyers are looking for. This is what we think the market's going to do right now. This is what we think is a good place to get out there to get your house sold. The appraisal is basically they're working for the bank and they are justifying the amount that they're loaning on that property. So that could be very different. We've all got that call. All of us have gotten that call where the appraiser calls and says, where did you get these comps? Like, I cannot justify this. Okay. She's doing her job and I've done my job. I probably got the same comps as that appraiser. And I know where those numbers come in at, but I also know that I can get multiple buyers to offer my seller more. And that's where my obligation is. My obligation is to get them as much as I can. Now, I'm of course going to have that conversation with my seller beforehand and say, I can only justify around here. And so just know that an appraiser's going to be using these, and I don't know how that's going to shake out, but I think I can get you this. And I have a perfect example. I did this on a place in Harper Valley. I knew what the comps were for the area. I knew what they were, but I also knew that it was a unique property. I knew that there wasn't a lot down there. I knew it was a desirable area. I knew that right across the street, square footage was almost twice that. It was an easy transition for people to want to make. And I kind of set it at a number where I thought, I really think we're going to get buyers right here. And sure enough, we did. And
it was like $30,000 or $40,000 higher.
And we actually got the appraisal to come in there as well, even though I didn't have a comp in that neighborhood that could justify that. So know that what our jobs we do are different. The appraiser has a very important job. They are looking out for the lender. They are looking out for, their best interests. They're putting money up and they want to make sure that what they're putting money on is worth it. And what I want to do is give my seller, with my market analysis, what I'm doing with that is giving my seller what I think I can bring a buyer for. And that could be above appraisal. It could be below appraisal.
I think
they're not the same.
A bunch of offers though, it's very easy to justify to an appraiser.
It's way easier because if I can go in and say, and they say, I can't make these numbers work. And I say, but I had, 4 or 5 offers, all above asking, all right here, all had escalation clauses. That's telling you right there what a buyer is willing to pay for that home. That establishes some value as well.
Absolutely. Well, and these are all great points and fantastic discussion because we could literally talk for another 30 minutes or an hour on this topic, but we got to wind it down. And hopefully for our viewers, this gives you some insight to how, as professionals, we approach a market analysis. And there is more than just pulling some comps and saying, here's your range. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. Current market conditions, active competition, what has actually sold, the improvements on your property. So you do have a market analysis. And Paul, thank you again for saying that there is a difference between a market analysis and an actual strategy. So great discussion. Thank you for all your input there. And hopefully our viewers pulled some some little golden nuggets from that. So if you like our content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Throw out a comment and a talking point on what you would like to see us discuss. We love engagement with our viewers. If you go onto our Facebook and like and follow our Facebook page, we're putting out all kinds of great content. We have a fantastic newsletter that goes out. So let us know if you're interested in that as well. Schedule a consultation with any one of the professionals here at the Lyons Group. We'd love to sit down with you, whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial. We can give you an advantage in today's market. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den.
Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.